This has been a project I've been involved with for a few years and has gone through various stages of development. Um, it's one of those projects that once it came across my desk, I never wanted to let go of because I love it so much. And it was a seminal part of my childhood and when I was in the height of my Stephen King years, this was sort of right up there with the classics. When I was growing up, my parents, God bless them, used to give me whatever the Stephen King release was for Christmas every year. So I read all of the early books when they came out. I was probably a little too young to be reading some of them. This one was early 80s, so yeah, it struck me. It struck me at an early age, and I think it wasn't until I became an adult that the real power of it struck me again. I've read it many times over the years, and it keeps getting scarier. It's one of his works where the horror isn't necessarily derived from the supernatural events. The horror comes from the relationships and the loss and the grief that are experienced by the family. And that's something that's so palpable and so identifiable that it just resonates with anybody. In connecting to a contemporary audience, we tried not to lean on technology. Very often, that's a shorthand for now we're living in the modern world. We wanted the film to feel like it could exist in another time, but that the characters would relate, and that the filmmaking style and our approach to the characters would feel like it comes from today's world. I think horror movie audiences and just film audiences in general have become more sophisticated. They expect more from genre films, not just jumps and scares. You have to provide jumps and scares, but they expect character development. They expect to be emotionally engaged. That's really where the fear comes from. When you can engage your audience emotionally in the characters, then you can scare them. This is about grief. And the monster in this film is loss and what that does to people. And, I have 2 kids. Writing this material was very difficult for me, but I really tried to put myself in the shoes of a parent and of a family going through the most painful loss you can go through, and really try to wrap my mind around what that does to relationships and what that does to people. And that's where the horror lives. What's so fun with Stephen King is that he gives you characters that seem so real. Like they seem like they live next door to you. And so it's so easy to take the ride with them. And then he sets them on a path where they start to make choices. And you're screaming, please don't do that thing, whatever it is. But you know they will. And they keep making choices. And the situations get more horrifying, just more electric, where you're just screaming inside, like, please. It's the classic, like, don't go in the attic. They always do. They always do. And that's what makes it really fun. So what we tried to do was really honor that tradition of making identifiable characters that felt like you knew them, that felt like they could be part of your life, and then making the ride that they go on as horrifying as possible. Whenever you're adapting a piece of literary material that is so beloved, where do you make changes? You have to make changes to make it work as a movie. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about some very specific changes that we wanted to make from the book. And then at the same time, things that we wanted to take from the book and foreground in our story. Characters that we wanted to foreground, or plot elements and plot twists that we wanted to foreground and that we wanted to preserve and protect. And part of that is to, you're speaking to many different audiences when you're writing a script like this. We want to appeal to Stephen King fans. We want to appeal to people who've never read the book or seen the movie, who could be coming in just completely green on the story. And then we want to appeal to an audience who might not go to every horror movie, but would be curious, either because of Stephen King or the actors, to come and check out something new. So you have to be able to write the story on three or four different levels, and picking what stuff from the book goes in and what stuff to change was really, that strategy really spoke to trying to get that done. I think the first time we sat down for coffee, the feeling that we were all very like-minded in the approach, and then it became an exercise in how much can we do? Like, what can we get away with? How much can we put in there? How far can we push it? So all of those elements, and most of those elements that were the changes that we made to the script after they came on board, we're going back to source material, we're going back to the book and finding pieces of the story and the DNA of the structure of the story, and finding places where we could reincorporate that into the script so that it felt like it really lived and breathed Pet Sematary. What we have here is an incredible source material, two directors with a vision that seems really fresh and relevant, and the resources to do something big and to really take some stabs at stuff. And so I think audiences are going to be blown away when they see it. I always start with character. So if you don't care about the people in the film, then you're never going to be scared. A classic slasher film where there's just a bunch of bubbleheads running around. I mean, I'm usually rooting for the guy with the chainsaw. So when I approach horror, I always try to approach from a character standpoint, find grounded, realistic characters that you identify with, that you are rooting for, and then put them in the scariest situations that you can. I mean, that's for me like a great, and there's a lot of elevated horror that's coming out right now that takes that approach. And I think audiences, you can tell these films are doing very well. Audiences appreciate that and respond to it. If I had the chance to bury anyone in the pet cemetery and bring them back from the dead, I would probably go first to my dog Tallulah, because it feels like you should start with an animal. Geez, that's a tough question. Anyone in the world, having spent many years in this story, I think I may have learned the lesson that sometimes dead is better, and I would just stick with maybe my dog. There are things that Stephen King can do that if other people did in film or novels would feel cliche. He manages to write things that are so identifiable and so familiar, and Pet Sematary is one that every time I read it, it seems scarier. It never loses that sense. It actually, as I became an adult and had children and started having an understanding of what it would feel like to be in that situation, it just resonated more. So it was fun to work on.